All right. Good morning, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, wherever you may be. Thank you once again. This is Saturday, June the 12th, 2021. It's 9 a.m. in the East. And wherever you are, we want to thank you for joining me once again on Hanging with Dr. Cooper. My guest today is none other than CEO of CD Moody Construction, based here in Atlanta, and my good friend, Dave Moody. Dave, thank you for joining me.
Doc, thanks so much for having me, man. I even got up
All
early
right.
on Saturday for you.
And I want to apologize. I'm gonna go ahead and put it out there, put myself on blast. This is a redo, you all, because Dave and I did this a while back, and yours truly forgot to download it in a little bit of a transition period. But here we are today, and so I want to thank Dave for his generosity and quite frankly his courage to come on and discuss an issue that's very, 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 very sensitive. Good morning, Chad Lee. Always give a shout out to my first responders, if you will. And discussing this issue of childhood sexual abuse. And also, Dave's going to talk a little bit about fighting through the fear, his journey of overcoming those challenges. His book that's been out for some time now that he speaks on literally around the world. Before we get into it, I'll make a couple of announcements. Tomorrow on Hanging with Dr. Cooper, again, this is June. June is Men's Health Month. And we are covering a number of topics related to men's health, not just men's mental health. If you notice the postings I've had over the last several, hey, Pam Brown, how are you doing? The last several days and weeks have all been about some subject that we're going to follow up on Saturdays with a more in-depth discussion. And this week that has been about mental health, sexual abuse, and a number of the issues related to our psychology. Tomorrow, you've also noticed this week, we talked about GI health. Tomorrow, another very special Hanging with Dr. Cooper. I have my good friend Kevin Woods, Dr. Kevin Woods, who's an interventional gastroenterologist who is going to come on the show and talk about the importance of gastrointestinal health. And I think we've overlooked that for a number of years. But today we're talking with Dave Moody. And Dave, again, man, thank you so much for coming on. Just give us for the benefit of the audience, give us a little bit of background on who you are.
Sure.
And your upbringing, where you're from, and what that was like.
Sure. I'm Dave Moody. Actually, it's Charles David Moody Jr., but I go by David because my son's the third and my father was senior. So we had to know who was getting yelled at when we were called. So we used different names to track which one of us is in trouble.
I got it.
I was born in Chicago in 1956, South Side. My dad originally was in the service. He was an officer. And so my dad was stationed in Panama. He was one of the first Black officers to lead integrated troops in Panama. And my mother was pregnant with me in Panama. So she came home to Chicago because she said, in case I wanted to be president one day, there would be no stuff about where I was born. And it's kind of amazing that in 1956, my parents believed, even though it was Jim Crow and segregation, that I could be the president if I wanted to. So that kind of shows you their forward thinking and what they instilled in me. I went to high school in Ann Arbor, Michigan. We moved from Chicago to Ann Arbor, Michigan. My dad started working for the University of Michigan. And then in 1974, I finished high school and I came to Morehouse College, came down on a football scholarship. Football coach had a player take me to Spelman on my recruiting trip. I saw Spelman at lunchtime. I signed my letter of intent right then. I never saw the practice field or anything. I saw Spelman and went, oh my God. And then I saw Clark and Morris Brown. You got to think in 1974, man, the HBCU AU Center was in its heyday. Atlanta had just reached 1 million people. 285 was empty at night. And
Wow.
yeah, so I finished Morehouse and then I went to Howard University and got my degree in architecture. Started my career with Bechtel Power, which is one of the largest engineering construction companies in the world. I started in the nuclear power division in Michigan. Got married in 1982, 1983. My parents lived 2 miles to the left. My wife's parents were 2 miles to the right. And I said, we're going to be happily married. We're getting out of here. So we said, it was too much whose house we were going to for Thanksgiving, Christmas. And that's why my children would tell you when they turned 18, I said, look, whatever y'all want to do for the holidays, you do. Because I never wanted that stress of them did I spend enough time at my parents' house or so we just, because that was just stressful. Anyway, I left a great job at Bechtel. My wife had a good job at University of Michigan. I said, hey, I got this great idea. I'm going to take you to Atlanta, where I went to college. I got a job. 2 months later, that company goes bankrupt. Now I don't have a job. So I worked for small companies for the next 4 years. And finally, we were so broke and stuff, I was able to borrow 3-4 grand from a bank. I don't know how it happened. Opportunity came, and we started our business. And our first
Wow.
contract was $88,000 at Underground Atlanta.
Wow. What did you do at Underground, Dave?
Well, the first job was a joint venture. We built the bridge over the MARTA tracks where
Okay.
the big tower is. But my
Yeah.
first job on my own in 1988 was concrete pier caps and piles, driving and auger cast piles for one of the little buildings at Underground Atlanta. And that was
Mhm.
my first contract, $88,000. I was scared to death. I was 31 years old, didn't know. Actually, I just turned 32. I didn't know what I was doing, didn't know how I was green, but God had a plan for me.
Mm-hmm. Man, let me tell me a little bit about getting into engineering at Morehouse. You hear so much about the health sciences and higher education and law and business and all the accolades of Morehouse men. And honestly, you're the only one I know of all the people I know that went to Morehouse that in engineering. But I'm making the assumption you take the best of the best, the creme de la creme of African American men in this country, that you're going to get that. But tell me a little bit about that, because the health sciences program over there is huge, and the business, the connection with Wall Street is huge. Tell me a little bit about engineering at Morehouse. My son is a senior there now, and is interested, quite frankly, in real estate along the lines where you've been.
Right. Well, you got to remember, Morehouse has a dual degree program with Georgia Tech. It was one of the
Okay.
first, and then we have it also with North Carolina A&T. We now have it. My dad actually helped set up the program with architecture at
Okay.
Michigan. So I
Okay.
finished my degree in psychology at Morehouse, and then I went to Howard and got my professional degree in architecture.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Got
I
you.
didn't do
Got you.
do I started in dual degree, but they didn't have architecture set up then, and I wanted architecture, and I wanted to finish Morehouse though, so I finished, and then I went to architecture school.
I got you. Got you. Okay, good. That's good information. Now, Dave, it's hard. It's hard in your case because we're here talking about your life and your struggles with dealing with childhood sexual abuse. And it's very difficult for you to separate that experience from your childhood. So, talk a little bit about how that sort of affected all the things that once that happened, the lead up to it, and then once that happened, how that affected your childhood upbringing, and then even on into your education.
Well, when I look back, and I've done that a lot to really understand the impact, and because I try and share, because I don't want other people to suffer in silence. Um, Let it impact you as much as it impacted me, as far as performance and as a professional, and uh, self-doubt, the embarrassment, the shame, the fear that comes with it. And like many of us, a predator is someone. 90% of predators, this is proven, is from all the research. 90% of predators is someone in the family or close to the family. Mine was the male babysitter of our regular babysitter. It was her 18-year-old son, 19-year-old son, and I was 9 years old, and he groomed me, and that's how many people are. You're groomed. Predators are, they're very good, and then the threats and the fear of they'll kill you, or they'll if you tell. And the one important thing I tell parents, you have to be careful what you say to a child. My mother thought something was up. She called me into her room and she said, "Don't let anyone touch you." Well, he had already touched me. So now I think it's my fault.
Ah,
So, right. So we have to be cognizant of our words, especially with children. So I just buried it. Fortunately, I'm one of the fortunate ones. I never saw him again until I was like 14. But by then, I'm almost 6 feet tall. I'm thinking revenge. Fortunately, we moved to Ann Arbor, Michigan when I was 14. So I'm one of those fortunate ones. I was completely removed from the environment, so I was able, what I thought, to bury it. You know, so I had planned on dying with my secret. I had never planned on sharing with it. But I
Mhm.
look back over time, I actually had a couple of panic attacks afterwards where I was taken to the hospital and stuff, and they just said I was dehydrated or certain things. And there's no way that I think all that was happening from what suppressed memories.
Mhm.
But my self-esteem in reality, when I look back, was always kind of low because I was like, I felt damaged. I felt like damaged goods. And I think one of the reasons, even though I'm 65, I still, try and really enjoy life and say I'll never grow up. And I think part of it is I'm always looking, trying to get my innocence back that was stolen. Because
Mm.
once you have an
Mm.
innocence stolen from you, it
Mm.
impacts you, especially when you don't have any outlet to talk or understand what's going on because you're ashamed, especially as a heterosexual male. You didn't want to say a male had done that to you, so you definitely bury it even more. But anyway, 1992, at 36 years old, our company is growing. We just won Small Business Company of the Year. We're the first Black company to win that from the Atlanta Chamber of Commerce and Atlanta Business Chronicle. And I just came back from my wife and I, Carla, just came back from the White House. We were one of the companies to receive a national award. And I'm like, man, we're
Mhm.
rolling. And then my wife finds out someone close to her had been sexually abused. And I
Mm.
blurted it out. Did it happen to
Mm.
me? And I had never planned on saying anything. So after I said it, I went, oh, okay, that's not too bad. And then within a couple of months, I had a really bad panic attack, which I didn't know what was going on. I'm driving to the gym and I pull over because I can't breathe all of a sudden. I'm thinking I'm having a heart attack. I tried to call my wife on my cell phone. That's back when you had the phone, locked in your car there, and it was
Yeah. Yeah.
35, and it was and it was
the
35
bag. The
cents a minute.
bag. The bag
Yeah,
phone.
yeah, and it was 35 cents a minute to talk to
Yep.
someone. And so I was trying to reach my wife. I couldn't reach her. And it's funny, I tried to reach her first before I called 911. So I called 911, ambulance come, and now I kind of chuckle about it because, you know, I'm on the side of the road in Stone Mountain on Rockbridge. They got me all hooked up to these things. And I'm more worried about who's seeing me hooked up on the side of the road than I am about what's really happening to me.
Mm.
So they go, sir, everything's fine. Go see your doctor. So I go to my doctor, and my doctor goes, hey, look, your business 4 years old, you're under a lot of stress. So they assumed it was stress. Say, hey, just take these pills and you'll be fine. So I'm thinking,
Yeah.
okay, it's just stress. I'm not thinking what happened to me 27 years earlier could be impacting me now because I'm like, hey, I finished 2 colleges and I've got a business. So there's no way this is messing with me. And
Mm.
then a couple months later, I'm out of town at a convention in St. Simons, Georgia. And I have a really bad one. They take me to the emergency room. In fact, it was Ken Madlock who took me to the
Mm.
emergency room, Morehouse, fellow Morehouse man. He was at
Yeah.
this dinner and they said, sir, everything's fine. But now I'm having a complete nervous breakdown. I get back to my hotel room. Now I'm having uncontrollable muscle tremors. I can't stop crying. I got the shakes. I mean, I am literally falling apart in front of my own eyes. You hear about that, but I couldn't believe it. So that morning, I didn't sleep. I got up and told the folks, hey, I got to leave. And that was the longest 5-hour drive back to Atlanta. And I probably had a $300 phone bill because I had to call my wife every 10 or 15 minutes because I was
Just to
having these
make it.
panic attacks,
Yeah.
driving back. I get home
Mm.
and basically collapse. Um, but I couldn't tell anyone. My business was 4 years old, so my wife, she's a she had only been out of nursing school a couple of years, and she would patch me together. I'd go in for things I had to do, but I'm literally just falling apart. I got 2 young kids. I don't know what's going on, and I go get every kind of test you can think of, doc. I had the brain scans, I had
Yeah,
sleep tests, and they
yeah,
can't find anything. And
yeah,
finally, I this is why I know there is a God and I believe in angels because I cannot remember her name. I was coming out of church one Sunday, and it was a church member who was a psychiatrist, and we were in the lobby just talking. I was telling her what was going on, and somehow she put it together quickly and said, "Hey, Dave, you're having panic attacks." And then we were able to put together the childhood sexual abuse. And then I was on kind of on my road, but I've never seen her again. I can't remember her name, but it was that situation that helped me finally say, okay, we know what's going on. But what I didn't do, I went and got therapy, but I only got therapy for um, panic attacks and anxiety. I didn't deal with the trauma and the impact, Doc. So I'll let you ask more about it. I
yeah,
was kind of
yeah,
getting
yeah.
there.
So
There.
you were dealing like we do so often in medicine with the symptom and not necessarily the actual disease itself or the actual traumatic event. Let me ask you something, Dave. And so just to get the audience up to date, my guest is Dave Moody, CEO, founder of CD Moody Construction here in Atlanta. Let me just tell you all something. This is a bad brother. I mean, I don't know many African American men, first of all, that have made nearly $4 billion in the construction industry around this country. Now, that may just be because out of my ignorance, I haven't done research, but I know Dave has, and has
Well,
done a
do me
lot of
a
major
favor, Doc.
projects.
Say
Mhm.
we built. I didn't make four
Built,
billion. Say we built. There you go. I don't want folks
built.
thinking I'm a billionaire. There you go.
Yeah, built $4 billion worth
There you go.
of projects in this country. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And
Okay.
so, I mean, that is really really huge. And he's my guest. He's talking about his book and his struggles, his book, Fighting Through the Fear, and his struggles with dealing with childhood sexual abuse. Dave, I wrote down a couple things here I wanted to just kind of circle back on. How do you feel about the brother? I'm assuming that this brother is just a few years older than you, and you
Well, he
said you
was
had seen him
nine.
only once. Was dealing with that emotion of seeing him again and feeling that um, that anger and that sort of impulse to react, has that been a part of your healing, and what how has that sort of evolved over the years?
Sure. Well, okay, he was 9 years older than me, and that time 9 years is major. I mean, he's an adult,
Right, right, that's
and
true.
yeah. So, and that's the part I had to deal with because I beat myself like up about it. Like, well, how could you let this happen? But when you're nine and that person's 18, 19, that's a
Yeah,
total different maturity. They got you thinking this is okay, even though you ain't really feeling it and all that. Something ain't right. So um, it took me a lot of years to forgive. And let me make it clear: I have forgiven, but I have forgiven for myself. I
right,
cannot see this person. If I see this person, I got to ask God for a grace period because I'm afraid what I would do. Um, I've never said his name. I got a couple buddies from my old neighborhood in Chicago that told me, "Hey, we can make this go away for you. You tell us who it is," and I wouldn't do that because I didn't want that on me.
right.
Um, and my trauma therapy, I did cognitive behavioral therapy
Yeah.
a few months ago, and that really helped me relive it. Ernest Greer is my attorney. I
Yeah.
actually had got set up for Ernest and them to find him, and I was going to file a civil lawsuit against him. And then my wife, she kind of talked me out of it because she's still afraid if I see him,
Hmm.
what I do.
Hmm.
So there's a difference in forgiveness. There's a forgiveness of where I had to forgive him to forgive myself, but it's
Right.
not the forgiveness where I can go break bread or even be in the same room with this person because the
Yeah.
damage that was done is real.
Yeah. Dave, let me ask you another question. So you majored in psychology at Morehouse,
Right.
and I have to believe that going through and majoring in psychology, there's a lot of the issues that you were dealing with that came up in your academic in that academic training that you had in psychology. But yet you said even years later, you were not connecting you were not connecting the panic attacks with that childhood trauma. Talk a little bit about that and how you made that connection, or how you went down that pathway, and yet there was something going on inside of you just started suppressing, because you said you couldn't even say it for a
Right.
number of years. Yeah.
Well, when you think about it, um, it's like all men, especially men, we're told to power through, man up.
Especially black
So
men. Yeah. Hmm.
so you're
Yeah.
just told to man up.
Yep.
you know. So I did what all of us tend to do. I just manned up. That's like this happened. It's horrible. It's traumatic. But I'm a man. I can't let this deter me. I can't let it stop me. But unfortunately, so many people end up taking destructive lifestyles to ease that pain: alcohol, drinking, sexual stuff, gambling. Where you're me, I tried to stay real busy. I never
Hmm.
wanted to be alone because I didn't like to be alone with my thoughts to remember, because I would
Yeah.
get flashes of what happened. And so it's unfortunate that we are taught that mental health is means you're crazy, and anxiety and panic attacks are part of mental health, but you just didn't address it. And the other thing was, I didn't want to give that much power to what happened to me, that it could be impacting my life like that. But it affected my business in reality, because until I finally did this cognitive behavioral therapy, I spent most of my business career fighting anxiety,
Hmm.
you know, or not trying certain projects, or the one part I really learned from therapy recently was I attended to let clients, people perceive power. I would always let them really take advantage of me, because I didn't want the pain of, like, if I it was weird, but because of what happened to me, I felt that people in power had control almost.
Ah.
And I would give in when I should stand up for stuff that they
Mhm.
actually owed me or whatever.
Got
And
it.
I did. So it was just interesting when I look back at how it really impacted different parts of my life, that I'm finally, through the cognitive behavioral therapy, have finally freed myself from. Because it wasn't until recently that I actually ever said what actually happened to me. And I told my wife, and as they say in the Bible about wailing, I had never cried about what happened to me. You
Hmm.
know, I let out sounds of tears and yells as I did for like 20 minutes that I didn't even know I could do. And this was like 4 or 5
Wow.
months ago. And
Wow.
when yeah, I mean, because I had finally said the actual acts that took place, and because I had never even said that. I just said I was sexually abused. And I
Yeah.
was like finally freeing that.
Yeah. I just want to give a little shout out here. Your Morehouse brothers are checking in. Ronnie Freeman, Senior, Walter Faulkner, Quentin Tooks, checking in on the in the chat space. Good morning, brothers, and good morning to everybody else. You're hanging with Dr. Cooper. I'm talking to my guest this morning, um, David Moody, who is the founder and CEO of CD Moody Construction. We're talking about his book, Fighting Through the Fear and his challenge with dealing with childhood sexual abuse. I really want to highlight something here, Dave, now, because I think this is very important for the people who are out there listening to understand. Dave Moody is in his seventh decade on this earth, 65 years old. Okay, this trauma happened at age 9, literally 55, 56 years ago. So you got to, and here we are now, and you're talking about just having recently undergone CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and now putting all of those pieces together in terms of how it has impacted your business, your life, and even going forward on a day-to-day basis, how that is a challenge. So I want you, Dave, if you will, to, because one of the things that you have done over the last several years is as I would, not to say a negative term, but you've had this catharsis. I follow you on
Right.
CD Moody Speaks and on social media, and I've watched how this is playing out with you, and certainly when I finally got your book, I understood very, very clearly. But I think it's important to point out to this audience how this is truly a lifelong And I don't want to empower struggle, but it's a
Right.
challenge to deal with this in a life, and it's probably even more important, and you probably would agree with this, for us to recognize it and to really be sensitive and reach out to those people who are suffering from it, and then and allow them to give them avenues to come out and be able to deal with this rather than and deal with it in a negative way, which could, the man up oftentimes for us leads to man down, as you know.
Right.
So just speak to that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, you got to think about something, Doc. One in
Mhm.
10 will be sexually abused by the age of 18. There's an
Wow.
estimated 42 million survivors just in the United States. Doc, there's a study that's been done. 60 to 70% of inmates have been some type of abuse, sexual abuse.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what ends up happening, the pain is real. I give you a good example. I speak, all around the country on this topic, but I spoke for Dr. Linda Haynes. Judge Linda Haynes in DeKalb County. She had a thing called Rebound program. It's for kids who are like 13 or 15 starting to get in trouble, and they have a counselor. And so she had me come speak. And I told my story, and went real well. And then about a week later, the judge calls me. She goes, Dave, after you spoke, one of the young men came to us and said, the reason I'm acting out and getting in trouble, that's what my stepfather's doing to me. They did the investigation. The boy was telling the truth, and they got him out, but his life was changed. And it just proves, it happens so much, and so many of us have nowhere to go. We're stuck in these environments. I've heard stories where people were stuck in these environments for 10 years, 15
Wow.
years. I had a professor recently in California reach out to me. Her stepfather um, had been having a relationship for her for 20 years, and she's finally trying to free herself. And her mother knew it. I could tell you
Mm.
stories that would just make you sick. And so
Mm.
that's one of the reasons I speak out, because it is so real. And we tend and I I don't want to scare parents or grandparents, because I make sure my kids still had a good, childhood. They had sleepovers, went to sleepovers, and I try to be as cautious as possible. But everybody should know the signs, the things to look for, and believe a child. In your what made me finally speak up was at Penn State. What's that guy's name? That coach?
Bo Shimba. No, no, not. Oh, no,
No,
not. I was getting ready. I was going to ask.
Bo's
I
a
was
new
going to
one.
bring up Bo Shimba. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about.
But
It'll pop
well,
in my head
anyway,
here.
that coach, yeah,
Yeah.
that coach Paterno's guy, but that coach, and I was watching it on. I'd be working out in the morning, and I would be watching the whole thing on ESPN go down. And when they told the story about how that assistant coach heard what that coach was doing to that boy in that shower, and
Hmm.
instead of him going in and saving the boy, he goes home and asks his dad, what should he do? And supposedly they go to Paterno, and just told him he couldn't bring, and then finally told the guy he couldn't bring kids anymore to the facilities. And I just went, hey, I have to speak up so people understand this happens more than they realize. And now you see Mike Tyson's come out about it, Sugar Ray Leonard has come out
Yep.
about it. Both of them have had substance abuse or problems of different kind of issues to try and mask that pain. Because it really impacts you, whether it happens once or for years. It it damaged something about you. Now, the good news is I always tell people you can turn trauma into triumph, but you got to get the right counseling, the right support system, and you have to free yourself, because you end up blaming yourself often for being weak.
Mhm.
Um, Oprah just, on her recent show she was doing, she talks about how her childhood, she had a child like at 14, she was, sexually abused, and how it impacted her life. But one of the things I did different, you have a lot of people talk about the abuse they've been through. I want to talk about also, about the anxiety, the panic attacks, having a breakdown, different things, because when I was going through this in 92, I didn't hear anybody talk about that. So I'm thinking, here I am, I'm weak, you know,
Yeah.
and little did I know what I was going through was actually normal. When I say normal, That's part of this process. But for me, I'm thinking I'm weak. I'm a father with two kids. I got a young business. I should have been in a hospital, actually resting, getting the help I needed to deal with this, but I couldn't because I had too much I was responsible for. And I'm one of those folks like most of us. Once I knew what panic attacks were and anxiety and how to breathe and have Xanax if I needed, I just kept powering through. But what I realized, I would power through and then my body would start breaking down. I'd start
Break it down.
getting
Yeah.
getting
Yeah.
tired, and that's why I work out so much, even though I got bad eating habits. But I'm in really
Mhm.
good physical shape. But both my parents died in 2019. They died 67 days apart. It was unexpected, and I had to deal with a lot of stuff with my brothers dealing with those items. And I realized my parents were part of my time consuming stuff. I didn't have to deal with my anxiety because I had to focus on them and their health and that kind of stuff. And when they died, that whole vacuum was,
Void.
that was gone. I had this
Void. There's a
void.
void. Yeah.
Yeah, all of a sudden I had this huge void. And then, I had to go through emptying out the house and selling the house. Now all of a sudden it's completely empty. Everything's gone. And I found myself um, when COVID came and stuff, I was actually about to have another breakdown, but I saw the signs. I was emotionally just drained. And so when I say breakdown, I want people to understand you can function with a breakdown, you know, but as far as your profession and work, it depends how bad it can get. But I found myself where I was just getting emotionally wiped out. And that's what finally made me go get trauma therapy. Because I
Okay.
said, I don't want to live where I got to keep powering through and then I get tired,
Yeah.
emotionally tired. And so for the first time in my life, I'm free. Excuse me.
Yeah.
So
Eh,
go ahead.
Yeah. So that was Jerry Sandusky at Penn
That's
State.
it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. And then
Yep.
now recently, of course, Bo Schembechler's own son came out. And I find it just truly fascinating. I want to say this to the audience as a healthcare professional. It is not normal. It is not absolutely not normal for a child who has not had exposure to any kind of sexual encounter to fantasize about that. That is not normal behavior for a child. And so when kids say that, or they intimate that something like that has happened or went on with them, it is largely going to be true. It is just not normal for a child. They don't biologically haven't matured, and existentially haven't in a real in the real world environment that they should be in, have not been exposed to that. So they should not be having any kind of abnormal fantasy about that. Would you agree with that, Dave?
See, that's the deal. I had no idea what sex was all about.
There you
So
go.
when it happened to me, he started showing me, and this is 1965. So he's showing me these little flip porn, these little flip cartoons, and it's heterosexual sex. And he's showing me these things and different stuff. So they groom me, and I'm still like, is that, I don't know nothing about sex. I mean, um, so that's true. A kid, unless they're seeing it, we have no idea. And that's what I mean. When your innocence is stolen, and it really takes a part of you, and often you find yourself always searching for that innocence that was stolen. That's probably why I'm so silly, and I
Yeah.
enjoy and I laugh so much because I miss, even though I had what I would call a super normal childhood. Played a lot of sports, dated, all these things. Every now and then it would creep up in my mind. Right before I turned 16, I I started losing a bunch of weight. I had no energy. They took me to the doctor. They said everything seemed to be fine. And then one day it just stopped. So I had moments that we didn't realize that was what it was from. But like most people, especially if it's someone close to the family, from all the research I've done and all that's out there, just like you said, most adults don't want to believe it. They like, no, it's no way, or they say, well, we'll just keep you away from so and so.
Right.
And but that child has to. still see them, deal with them. And we always say children are resilient, but we forget children become adults
Yes, they
with
do.
adult real stuff.
That's right.
And that's why I really started speaking up, because I didn't want anyone to ever suffer in silence like I did. That is a horrible way to live. Even though my life's been good, I've great, and my friends really helped me, and my family. I mean, I got some of the best friends in the world, and we share each everything with each other. And I always tell people, it's really cool when you can age together with folks. I mean, we've talked about, my situation, some of them dealing with impotency from, prostate, and how they dealing with that, and
Yeah.
other kind of cancers, and losing parents, spouses, children. I mean, so having that core group of guys that you can cry with, laugh with, share your biggest fears with, really made what I went through even better. Than my wife, she was a hospice nurse, registered nurse, and my children. I mean, they just kept me going.
Yeah.
Um, I
Yeah.
never wanted to end my life or anything, but I reached a point I wanted to go just live in the woods. I just wanted to go. I didn't want to have to answer no more questions. I didn't want to be responsible for anything. I just wanted to be alone. When I say alone, I never rested from what happened in 92 with the complete nervous breakdown. I had to
Wow.
keep going. So that's what I
Wow.
mean. It impacted my business because I turned down a lot of opportunities. So I didn't really grow my business because I didn't have the energy, emotional energy, to keep pushing through the way I had to push through with anxiety and
Mhm.
panic attacks. And not until I did the cognitive behavioral therapy that I finally freed myself. Now I'm excited. I'm doing a project in Virginia. I'm about to do one in Ohio because I
Uh-huh.
finally, I finally freed myself. And a good friend of mine is Tommy Holder. I went and saw Tommy Holder,
Yeah.
and he just gave me some good advice, and he just really helped me through some things too.
Yeah. And I think it's important, and I want to just emphasize and highlight something you said. And this is particularly true for the men. This is Men's Health Month. Uh, Guys, brothers, and when I say that, don't get me wrong to some of my white friends that I mean you're my brother as well. And I
Right,
mean men, you've got to get over this man up stuff. And we've got to start supporting each other. That's why I'm doing this whole thing. I'm spending a lot of time this month focusing in on men's health. Get over this man up. You're not man up, because what man up is going to eventually mean is man down. That's why we die sooner. We're affected by many more things than our women. And I want to thank you all. You're hanging with Dr. Cooper this Saturday morning. I really appreciate you being here. I have a really special guest today, Mr. David Moody, who is the CEO and founder of David Moody, CD Moody Construction here in Atlanta, and he's discussing his book, Fighting Through the Fear. And I want you to go and I apologize, I didn't bring it downstairs. I don't know if my wife is listening, if she could bring it down for me, so I could just hold it up and you can see the cover. But Fighting Through the Fear, my journey of dealing with childhood sexual abuse. And I want you all to go get that book today, because in that book you will not only learn about all of the ins and outs and the effect that a traumatic event like this can have on a child, but also how that influences your behavior. But more importantly, I think the thing here that I see, Dave, is just that triumph, and this
right,
overcoming, despite how this tugs on you. And you just talked about more recently here going through CBT and having that. But then if you look back, all of the people you've been able to impact. And I also wanted to say that probably the number one friend of yours is your wife, Carla. I
right.
love your love affair. I mean, and the friendship is just amazing to see that. But I want you to just, if you will, you know, talk a little bit about, and again, I'm not going to put the word struggle in there, but
Right.
this ongoing, because you just
It's a
started the
struggle.
CBT. I'm sure you've gone through any, For me, dealing with PTSD, coming back from Iraq in theaters like that, it was meditation. That was my thing. I'm sure you've done some of those things. So talk a little bit about that ongoing journey and that therapy that
Sure.
you seek as you struggle through this.
Well, a couple things, Doc, and it's important. You got to have peace at home to deal with any kind of growth. It's I always tell people, you know, you can't deal with these things and then you don't have a peaceful environment. So I thank my family tremendously for that. I know I'm always safe at home. We don't always agree, and we have our moments, but 99% of the time there's peace. So that makes it, helpful. Trauma also, Doc, comes in so many fashion. I mean,
It does.
different form. You got poverty is a trauma. You got people who grow up in alcoholism, violence, domestic abuse, sexual abuse, and these traumas are real. And I didn't want to give what happened to me that much credit. I didn't want to feel it could have that kind of power. But when I finally started looking through my life and realized how much it was impacting me, and the what I call that imaginary fear that stops you. You just automatically had this self doubt. I mean, I had a friend. I think the part that gets helps me the most, Doc, like the person, my therapist that I use for this trauma, he worked with veterans. He was in the service, and I have so much respect because all my dad and all my uncles and family members were vets. They've served our country, and I can't imagine the trauma to see in war. You know, and even though you were a doctor, you saw probably some of the worst things a person could see. And we underestimate what that does to the brain.
That's exactly
And
right.
because I suffer with post-traumatic stress syndrome. There are certain triggers that I'm that 9-year-old kid again. If I feel somebody's trying to take advantage of me, I mean, I had to learn my triggers. I exercise a lot. I love camping and hiking. Um, those are the things that really, in my photography, those are the things that I use to meditate. There was a time after 92, for a while, I didn't like to be alone, period, because I didn't even want to have to remember what I was dealing with, what was going on. Now I like being by myself. I like when on a trail or out in Moodyville or just sitting alone. I enjoy those times now. For years I didn't want to be alone because I would remember uh, the panic attacks or anxiety. There were times I'd go places and I didn't stay long because I was afraid I was going to have a panic attack. And how would I explain that? And that's one of the reasons I didn't grow my business as much as travel because I was afraid to be out of town and have a panic attack.
Yeah, I want to just, I have to comment on this
Good.
because many people who know me know that I suffered from post-traumatic stress after my first deployment in Iraq, and the trigger there was going in and seeing having to pronounce a troop dead and opening a body bag, and there was just a body and no head. And so I tell young surgeons that there's absolutely nothing you're going to see Friday night at the Grady Memorial Hospital here in Atlanta, Knife and Gun Club, that can prepare you for that. And there's something in your head that is ticked off. And I later learned that when I went through the TRP, or trauma recovery program, over at the VA. But this very interesting. You said something there that took me back, and I remember this like yesterday. A couple of things. One is having that stable home environment is so important, and I thank my wife Sandy for her years of support for me, and certainly during those times where it was very, very difficult. But I remember my son once saying, Dave, it was during the holidays, and we were going to the mall, and he was, oh God, I don't know, he was just single digits, maybe 5 or 6 years old. And the girls were excited, and we were going to the mall. And I said, well, I'm just going to sit down right here. And my son looked up at my wife and the girls and my other two daughters who were there with us and said, oh, no, daddy doesn't like malls. He's going to sit right there till we're done. And I said, wow. That was literally like in my head. This kid has been observing something, some sort of abnormal kind of behavior. And quite frankly, Dave, honestly, until that he said that, I didn't really realize that as I walked into malls and I was around a lot of people, and this is not about me today. I can share that
Go
with the
ahead.
crowd later,
Go
but
ahead.
it was something about those crowds that was connecting me back to being in that crowded
Yep.
trauma room in Iraq when all hell was breaking loose, literally, and they're bringing in bodies with dismembered parts and all of
Yep.
this stuff, and all you can see, literally, all you see, literally, as a surgeon, you're sitting there, you're almost robotic because although you're doing good surgery, all you can see in your head, at least for me, was that my turn is. I mean, I'm coming up next. It's just a matter of
Yep.
time before they get one of these bombs right, and it's going to hit me in the head, and I'm going to be somewhere headless, and somebody will be pronouncing me dead. And literally, this went on for hours and hours, and then
Yep.
night after night after night after night, and so somehow you really, it's amazing how your body then implants that
Yep.
stressor somewhere deep inside the hippocampus, and you begin to, and it's and what happens is it comes forward when it's not supposed to, and it
Yep.
results into the panic attack. And so that's my, so I understand exactly what it is, that experience of having gone through that. Now, Dave, let me ask you this though, but it seems like, and you were talking about going out and being isolated, but now I see you out in the woods and stuff and hiking, and it sounds like you really really enjoy doing that. But it's also therapeutic for you.
Oh, I love it. I mean, it was this freeing uh, for me, and also it was like part of that triumph. You know,
Triumph, yeah,
saying,
yeah,
like, man, this no longer stops me. And one of the other
yes,
reasons I really speak up, because there are so many people out here who are stuck and they just existing because the trauma they've gone through, they don't think they can get through it. And I want people to be able to be all they can be. I mean, just be incredible. Just, you know, get the help you need. Know you're not alone. You can get through this and go create something, go be be greater than you ever dreamed you can be. You know,
right,
but the other thing I always tell people, there's no secret pills, there's no secret therapy. There eventually we have to put the work in too though.
yeah,
I have to put the work in to want to heal and get better and leave that behind. And I tell people, you can still have an incredible life regardless of what we've been through, but there's going to be some things you just got to go through and to get there. But I just didn't want to leave, kind of in the service that said don't leave a fallen man behind. I
yeah,
didn't want to leave anybody behind. But what I found probably most rewarding, even though it's sad, and this happened just a couple weeks ago, when someone writes me an email or direct message me and tell me I saved their life. They were about to kill
wow,
themselves. And they'll say they read my post or saw one of my videos and I gave them, they knew they could make it. I spoke at this residential center for children, and I spoke to 12 boys, and they had different behavioral issues that was going on in their life. So I told my story, and one of them, he was about the age I was when it happened to me. He was about 10. He came up to me, he was crying, and he kind of waited till everybody was gone. And he said, "Mr. Moody, that's what was happening to me. And until I heard your story, I didn't think I would live. I didn't think I would make it. I didn't want to. But now I know there's a reason for me to live." And those are kind of things that make me share my story. And I have so many men, I mean, of who all walks of life who will run into me and they'll whisper it to me. They'll go, "Thank you. That happened to me." And um, I never ask them what. I just always go, "Hey, I'm here for you." But it's amazing how many men have shared that with me, and I always keep their confidence. And I always, this is the other thing I tell people too when they say, "I wish I had the courage to speak up like you." This isn't for everybody to speak up. The
that's
best
true.
thing you can do is take care of yourself and
Self,
be
right.
great and love and free yourself. I believe God put me in the position I'm in for me to speak up. This I just believe that's how I was created, you know, to tell this story and help
Right.
others. But I always make it clear to people that doesn't mean you're weak if you can't speak up. Hell, it took me 50 years to speak up
Yeah.
publicly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know,
Yeah, I think that's a very important point. This is not for everybody. This is as my friend Holly Bellman put in the chat, bold topic, and so at the root of our well-being. But you have to find your place. You have to find what is going to help you as you go through life and dealing with your trauma. So you don't have to have a microphone. You don't have to have a megaphone, and nobody's asking you to do that. But understand that Dave has found his peace in providing us with his experience, and just think about all the people. And Dave, I don't know, you probably haven't kept count, but I'm sure it's probably more than you can count, quite frankly. But from all of the speaking you have done, literally, I say internationally because you just did something up in Canada, and I'm not sure if that was related to construction or if it was related to the
it
book.
was both. It was both.
Yeah, yeah, because it's kind of, I imagine for you, I mean, you can't separate them. You cannot separate them. It's hard to do that, I would imagine, in
Well,
in terms of
that's
talking about the evolution of things.
but that's actually how the whole thing got started. I started a blog called moodyspeaks.com. And I
Mm,
started it 8 years ago to celebrate 25 years in business. And then and every week I did a year. And when I got to 1992, I went, I can't tell this story unless I tell the truth.
right.
And I had to tell the story about having a nervous breakdown from childhood sexual abuse trauma. And that was my biggest day ever read on my website when I said that. And that's when I realized, oh, I've tapped onto something.
Right.
And so then I realized like my book is a business book, it's my life story. Very little is about the sexual abuse as it is overcoming trauma, enjoying life and different things. And so I started, and for folks out there, moodyspeaks.com, you can go there and buy my book, or you can go to Amazon and buy it. But I started that website. I went to Harvard in 2015 and lived up there for 5 months. Carla and I lived up there, and it was a whole year program, but we lived there for 5 months. And it was for social entrepreneurship. People wanted to change the world, and mine was helping childhood sexual abuse survivors who are adults who never dealt with it. And so I created moodyspeaks.com so people could go in private and see positive stories, get resources, information. Because not everybody's like, I'm not one of these guys who's gonna go to some group thing and sing kumbaya and hug. And I like being just dealing with it. And because everybody has different ways of dealing with these things. So I just want to provide information for people. And like I said, I remember how lonely I felt. I felt so alone in 1992 because I thought I was the only person who was dealing with this. I felt so weak from having a complete breakdown and having anxiety and panic attacks. I mean, I had them so bad, I was having them rapid fire for a minute.
Hmm.
But I would look at my children and my wife and go, "Hey, man, we got to get through this." And I never forget when I was at my lowest, I looked in the mirror and I said, God, I don't know what's going on, but I'll never give my faith up. And I meant that. I mean, it was, I tell you, it was the stress of a business, the anxiety, what happened to me finally dealing with it, not knowing where to turn, how do you deal with that? And even then, I still never said what actually happened to me. That wasn't the
Right.
2020. You hear me?
Hmm.
2020 is the first time I actually said it. And that's where that cognitive behavior therapy came in because I had to kind of relive it and write it and go through all these things, but it freed me in a
Yeah.
way, that was just phenomenal.
Hmm. Yeah. I tell you, the CBT, the most difficult part of that for me at TRP at the VA was having to literally record that on a recorder over and over and over again, and then listen to it. over and over and over and over again. But let me just tell you something. It is extremely powerful form of therapy, and the psychologists and people who put that together are amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. This is Dr. Cooper, hanging with Dr. Cooper. We've been talking to my friend and author, as well as entrepreneur and construction magnate, Mr. David Moody, who is the CEO and founder of CD Moody Construction here in Atlanta, and also author of Fighting Through the Fear, My Journey of Healing from Childhood Sexual Abuse. I put the book in the chat. Also put how to connect with Dave through his website and blog at moodyspeaks.com. Moody, let me give you another word to kind of close it out. Let us leave the audience with something that you would like for them to know, and we'll wrap up.
Yeah, first of all, I just want to give thanks to all my boys and female friends. Y'all know who you are. I tell you all the time how much I love you. And I think sometimes they didn't understand why. I mean, because of y'all, you just mean the world to me. And living with anxiety and not wanting to show it, it was just tough at times. And I'm excited, man. I turned 65 a couple of weeks ago. Went and got my ear
Yeah, you
pierced.
told me.
Yeah. On the other side, went and got my ear pierced. So
That's
I'm
cool.
going to get a tat on my forearm, and I'm getting a tattoo that says "Turn trauma into triumph"
I
with a
love that.
cross to always remind myself. And I just want to help as many people be all they can be. I mean, my business is nowhere near where it could have been, but I think God took me on this journey the way He did for me to appreciate and help others. Because man, I'm gonna try and knock it out the park going forward. Um, but I just really love my wife, my children, but my really close friends. Y'all know who you are. And, like my man Ernest Greer, I saw he's on there, and Steve
Yeah,
Copeland, Alan Peterson, a bunch of Rob
yeah,
Burrows, Keith, a bunch of my
yeah.
frat
They're
brothers.
checking in. They're checking
Yeah,
in.
yeah, and all the cues out there. Whoop,
Oh yeah.
whoop. But I
No
guess
doubt.
one of the things I did, Doc, they always make survivors of childhood sexual abuse look so sad. And
Yeah.
that's the other thing I really wanted to dispel was, man, you can still have an incredible life. Yeah, I got issues. I got times where I'm down. I got times where I'm broken and just emotionally broken. But man, my life is still incredible, even with the challenges. And I have a saying, enjoy the journey of life, because when you look back over your journey, I don't care what, man, it's a great feeling to know what you came through and what you've done. And I also try and set an example. It's okay to say how much you love somebody, especially
Oh
your
yeah.
wife. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
now I'm a firm
Yeah.
believer now. I tell
Yeah.
people marriage ain't nothing to play with. Now, if it ain't working, it's time to move on. But if you yeah, now I'm not one of them cats that says you should stay married regardless. I think that's bad.
Yeah.
I think that's bad advice. But when you get that right person, boy, ain't nothing you can't do. And I'm gonna close with this, Doc. One of the reasons I love my wife, but one of the reasons I really took it to another level in 1992 when I had that breakdown, she ran to me, not from me.
Yeah.
And I've seen in too many situations when a traumatic event happens in a couple's life, it could be a loss of a child, all kind of things. When they run to each other and not from each other, that's when you know you got that person. So we run to each other, not run from each other. And Carla's never required me to provide some super lifestyle. She's happy, just us being together and working together. And she went to nursing school so we could have a steady income when I started the business, became an RN.
Right.
And life's great. And yeah, I still have moments with triggers and certain things, but I know the proper way to deal with it. And I keep going because I just want to be a shining light for anybody who's dealing with some kind of mental health challenges such as anxiety or trauma, or whatever it might be, and know you can still have an incredible life and don't give up.
I love it, man. Dave Moody, thank you so much, my brother. Fighting through the fear. It's in the chat. Everybody, I want to thank you all for hanging with Dr. Cooper. We have another program tomorrow. We're going to be talking to my good friend, Dr. Kevin Woods, about gastrointestinal health and some of the amazing stuff that they can do now to help deal with some of those issues. Dave, again, I want to thank you. Those of you in the chat, Michelle, Kate, Vanessa, Holly, Bob Burrows, Kate, Ernest Greer, G Money. I want to thank you all for being here. This is so important. You can catch this again if you missed it or you want to share it or if you missed portions at Dr. Coop MD on YouTube and also on Facebook on my personal channel as well as on my Dr. Coop MD channel. Dave, thank you again. And remember, today is the best day of your life. Live it well, live it now, because tomorrow is gone and or yesterday is gone and tomorrow's not promised. So be well, friends, and I'll see you tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time for another episode of Hanging with Dr. Cooper. Thank you so much. Have a fantastic Saturday.